let's talk about what we're doing today. So welcome everybody. This is a Neuroscience of Resilience with Hayden Lee, Master Certified Coach, and Dr. Kelly Kent, and they're both joining us from LA. And before we begin, just a couple of announcements. We are now in the middle of our 100 Sessions in 100 Days campaign. And our purpose is for ICF San Antonio coaches to provide support in this time of need to anybody in the greater San Antonio community. And everybody, all you need to do is contact us, go to our website at icfsanantonio.org, click on Find a Coach, and then choose a coach that you would like to start working with. We're doing this at no cost to our community. In terms of programming, we have a variety of things going on each month, and Coach Connect is something that we added recently during the pandemic, and it's a free informal session every Wednesday, actually every couple of Wednesdays at lunchtime. And this one this week is going to be on coaching with your strengths and values. And we invite you just to sign up as RSVP on our website. And again, there is no cost involved. The next one is Coaching in High Stress Times with Dr. Pat Williams, who's joining us from ICF Colorado. And this is going to be on Wednesday, June 3rd at noon. And I've already attended this session. It's amazing. And I really invite you to consider joining. You're in for a treat. The next thing is for those of you who are not yet members. There are lots of benefits to becoming a member of ICF San Antonio. We have a great community with amazing coaches, and it's really like a family in our chapter. And we have a lot of professional development where you can earn CCEUs. And this is just as important for new coaches, aspiring coaches, as well as seasoned, more mature coaches. And we have lots of opportunities to connect, to grow, to explore, and to continue growing as coaches. And without further ado, I would like to introduce you to Hayden Lee and Dr. Kelly Kent. Just a few words about Hayden and Kelly. Hayden is a Master Certified Executive Life and Leadership Coach, holding the highest credential possible in the professional coaching industry, and a co-founder of Mastermind Institute. And he's been chosen as one of the top 20 best life coaches in Los Angeles by expertise.com. Hayden works with highly achieving, highly motivated, and highly committed executives, leaders, entrepreneurs, and professionals who are ready to make the changes needed for exponential growth in personal and professional life. He has coached leaders from Fortune 500 and Forbes 500 companies. Wow. Hayden, this is amazing. And he has trained and mentored over 100 coaches worldwide. He's on the coaching faculty of Integrative Enneagram Solutions and Leadership Education for Asian Pacific's LEAP. He's one of the advisory board of Coach Training, EDU, an ICF accredited institution where he co-created the Executive Coach Training Program. Welcome, Hayden. Kelly is a neuroscientist that connects her passion for the brain and all of her work, including as a school board member, corporate creativity consultant, business owner, speaker, and her hardest job of all, parent. Since she completed her PhD in the molecular mechanisms of stroke recovery in 2011, Kelly has been taking her experience and expertise garnered at higher education institutions and applying them to the real world around her. While on one hand, Kelly was pursuing her postgraduate work in autism at the University of Southern California, she was also simultaneously teaching and mentoring graduate and undergraduate students. Kelly taught psychology undergraduate students at Moore Park College in Simi Valley and currently teaches neurobiology to psychotherapy graduate students at Antioch University in Culver City. The application of neuroscience to everyday life became her primary focus when Kelly co-founded Adapt ED Consultants. Through Adapt ED, Kelly has grown a company that uses neuroscience to provide tools and drive individual and organizational growth. This is accomplished by aligning corporate work cultures with how the brain functions optimally, training leaders to manage with the brain in mind, and helping organizations determine their own brain-based best practices. Everyone, welcome Hayden and welcome Kelly. I'm going to turn it over to them.
Yes. Thank you so much, Savannah. Kelly and I are so happy to be here. Woo! Welcome, ICF San Antonio. So like Susanna was saying, if you are in front of your computer, we do invite you to turn your camera on, please, because surprise, this is an interactive session. This is not a spectator sport. Coaching is all about bringing out the best in our clients. And in order to do that, we got to show up as our best, right? So I really do invite you to engage and ask yourself, what is your level of engagement right now in order to get the most out of the next 80 minutes that we have together, right? So before we dive in, so once again, I invite you to turn on your cameras and engage and play full out. Because as you know, the ICF definition of coaching is partnering with clients in a thought-provoking creative collaboration to maximize their personal professional potential. And we as coaches cannot help them maximize their potential if we ourselves are not committed to maximizing our own potential. So before we dive into the content, I would love to actually hear from some of you. What do you want to get out of this, our time together today, right? It's really important that you get clear on what you want to get out of it. Because I'll tell you all right now, Kelly and I want you to get out of this feeling inspired and motivated and confident and competent in some neuroscience principles in order to engage your clients and help them have more success and aha moments. So I'd love to hear from some of you. What's some things that you would love to get out of our time together today? Lisa?
Hi. I am actually just more interested in learning about how neuroscience can be used in coaching. I am only in the process of getting my certification, my ACC. And FYI, I'm actually not in San Antonio. I've been joining a lot of the programs that you guys have been putting on, but I'm based in Iowa.
Oh, nice.
And the neuroscience thing is something that I've really very recently become aware of and am thoroughly intrigued about it and how it can be used in coaching.
Yeah, wow. Nice, welcome. Thank you, Lisa. Isn't that exciting, Kelly? Like, spoiler alert to everyone on the call, neuroscience is everywhere and everything. And neuroscience is the backbone of coaching, right? So when we as coaches empower ourselves with what is happening in the brain during the coaching journey, I guarantee you, you will up-level your coaching skills and help your clients more, right? What do you think about that, Kelly?
Well, I was just, realizing that that was part of our journey together is when we started working together, we realized that all the work that you've been doing as a master certified coach is based in neuroscience because the intuition matches the biology and the work and the effort that you all are putting in to help your clients really corresponds to what we know about how the brain works best. Mm-hmm. So it's pretty fantastic when people are interested in understanding the biology behind what's working for them. Yeah,
absolutely. Anyone else want to share? Something that they really want to get out of today? Yes, Debbie?
Yeah, I will. Actually, Kelly just said what I was going to say. Oh. So thank you. I find myself gravitating to courses about how the brain works and then how to apply that to whatever it is that I'm working on. So right now, obviously I'm working on coaching, but it always happened that I was interested in how it applied to business because of how people tick. We are these human people, obviously. And so whatever's happening in our brain is how we're showing up behaviorally in our practice. So I'm really curious to see not just how the brain is working, but then specifically how it's happening in context of coaching. So the marrying of the two is fascinating to me.
Nice, cool. Thank you, Debbie. Anyone else want to share?
Yeah, hi, my name is Chris. I'm a coach in Denver, Colorado, but I work with friends of yours in San Antonio. Cindy Hoy is a friend of mine, a colleague of mine. And anyway, I come to coaching as a classroom teacher. So brain research, cognitive research, it all comes down to your point, Hayden, if you're going to be impactful in your coaching, when you allow the learner to make a memory that hooks the content and keeps it there pretty permanently. It's one thing to deliver a deck with slides on end, but if you make people laugh at every one of those slides, they're going to remember the content. So anyway, I appreciate the opportunity to take a deep dive in this. This is great.
Yeah, you're going to enjoy today because we're going to talk about that explicitly, that hooking of the emotion and the memory. So
awesome. Thank you.
Cool. Paula wanted to share something, right? Oh, you're on mute, Paula.
I hate when that happens. I was going to say, for me, it's deepening that competence in neuroscience. I come to coaching from an engineering background, so I'm a problem solver by education and by career, and I'm always looking for root cause. What is root cause? And as we build toward these solutions, what are all the pieces that go into it? So this understanding neuroscience is really critical just to the way that I operate.
Wonderful. You're going to love this, Paula. Coaching is an art and a science, right? And understanding that science piece is going to be so important. Yeah. Gail?
Sorry about that. Hi, I come to coaching from legal education, and I'm a lawyer, but now while we are on break, I'm working on my professional coaching certification, and I've been thinking a lot about resilience and mental health and how this entire pandemic and being locked down and in some cases being isolated, how is that affecting our brain chemistry? And is there any way that in our resilience, how can we take lessons from this perhaps to coaching?
yeah, so
absolutely. Yeah, go ahead, Kelly.
We could talk about resilience for an entire 12 hours of a course, right? And we'll give you guys a little snippet of the emotional aspects of resilience today, but you talked about something that's very near and dear to my heart, which is the social piece. And so that is a huge component of resilience that we won't be able to get into too deeply today, but I appreciate that you're thinking about it.
Yes. Maria, did you want to say something?
Oh, hello, everyone. I just want to present myself. I'm Susanna's friend, and my English is not that well, so I might be this time to be a hearing part instead of a talking part, although I talk a lot. But I'm studying a master of coaching, personal coaching, and I'm really thrilled about it. I mean, I'm loving it. I started education before, and right now I'm studying that master, and I want to learn from you guys. I mean, I think neurology and resilience are very interesting topics. And I'm at the same time I'm studying how do you say diplomado, Susana, of thanatology? A course or something course?
Yeah, it's like a specialization course in thanatology.
Okay, so at the same time of my master of coaching, I'm studying this thanatology course. So I think neurology and resilience is going to be really interesting for me. So thanks a lot for the invitation.
Yeah. Thank you, Maria. All right, anyone else want to speak themselves into the room before we jump in? Anyone else? Did you want anything, C. Lawning? Did you want to say anything or introduce yourself before we jump in? Yeah.
I can. I'm just here. I'm on the board for San Antonio ICF. And so I just want to represent the board. And I don't get to go to any of the events very often just due to scheduling. So if there's something that's available during time, I'm just so excited. So anytime I have the opportunity to learn, I'm down with that. So when I see something that's available in my schedule, I'm totally excited to get in and learn and improve and learn. So when I saw something in an open schedule they matched, I was all over it.
Woo, well, welcome.
And go ICF San Antonio. They absolutely adapted for what's happening. And I could not be more proud of those that are driving this. And I'm just so impressed with them as a team. Go team.
Yes, go team, ICF San Antonio. Well, welcome everyone. Thank you for taking a few minutes. That was actually not planned that we were going to go around and speak ourselves into the room. But I realized how, since we have a smaller group, we do have that luxury to get to know each other a little bit more. And the point that I was trying to make is, the next, 80 or 70 minutes or so, we want to make sure that this is interactive, right? So in coaching, as you know, you get out what you put in. So that's the point I was trying to make, was in our time together today, you will get out what you put in. So please be interactive. Please ask us questions. Please use the chat box. If you are not familiar with the chat function, please ask us questions, or please go like, hell yeah, or woohoo. Like, really, let's make this fun and interactive, because who knew that coaching and neuroscience could be so much fun? Because it is. And if you haven't noticed already, I have a lot of energy. So be on your toes, folks, because I will call on you if you do not raise your hand. I'm that teacher that makes sure that everyone is on their toes. So with that said, welcome everyone, and thank you, ICF San Antonio, Aurora, and Susanna, for inviting me and Kelly to be here. My name is Hayden Lee. I'm a master certified coach. So if you don't know, that is the highest credential that's possible in the ICF. So I have thousands and thousands of hours of coaching experience. But with that, I've really, really learned what it takes to be successful in this industry, successful in this business. And like I said, if you want to be a successful professional coach, you also have to invest in your own learning, and you also have to invest in your own personal growth, because you cannot take your clients further than you're willing to go yourself, right? So let that sink in. You will not be able to take your clients further than you're willing to go yourself. With that said, that's what led me and Dr. Kelly Kent to work together, in the sense that I realized in my years and years of coaching that the science piece was missing in my own, repertoire of coaching skills. So Dr. Kelly Kent and I, got together to form Mastermind Institute, which the purpose of that organization is to merge professional coaching and neuroscience in order to help you coaches have your clients have more success and more aha moments by understanding what's happening in the brain during the coaching journey. So that's me. And then let me turn it over to Dr. Kelly Kent to introduce herself, and then we'll slide into the content.
Great, thanks, Hayden. Yeah, I mean, Susanna read the bios, so I think those are wonderful. I will just say that I was in the traditional academic line, getting my PhD and then going on to do a postdoc, but the reality is that, everyone needs to understand basics about the brain. If you ask me, neuroscience can solve all the world's problems. And so it's been my mission ever since I actually got the doctorate to make sure that the very complicated, cutting edge neuroscience is accessible to everyday people. And so in my first years as a consultant, I was doing that in the world of education. I went on to do that in organizational development. And now I'm really focusing deeply on this work with Master Certified Coach Hayden Lee, because I realize how powerful it is when you're able to work in these one-on-one settings and really get deep buy-in into the potential for growth. And so that's been really fulfilling, and you're loving it. And we are at the end going to talk about the reason that we came together to form Mastermind Institute, which was to develop this course, Information for Transformation. And that is where we do have the time to get into the social aspects of resilience, to get back to that point we touched upon earlier. But today we'll be talking about it primarily from an emotional perspective. And so I'm going to go ahead and share my screens if we're ready.
Yeah,
And
so Kelly, while you do let me know if you got your screen share, if you're able to do that. And I just want to add, though, I think a really, really important point is I don't think anyone in this room would argue that understanding neuroscience is important, but the challenge comes from how do I bring that into my coaching sessions, right? And that's why I'm here, is to actually help you be able to immediately apply neuroscience concepts into coaching. If you're ready to immediately skyrocket and grow your coaching skills, we're going to talk about how to do that. Because I think oftentimes, coaches intuitively know, oh, I think understanding the brain is important, but then being able to seamlessly apply that into a coaching session with a client is more challenging. So that's really what we're going to talk about, is how to learn this wonderful information about neuroscience and how I can immediately use it in a coaching session to powerfully serve my client. So back to you, Kelly.
awesome. Thank you so much. Okay, well, here we are. And we are giving you all a snippet of our Neuroscience of Resilience content. And it is actually the merge of a two-part series that we have done in other virtual settings. And so we're going to deliver part one, which is going to have some content and then some application to coaching. That's called Regulating Your Lizard Brain to Get Productive Again. Then we're going to have a breakout room session, and we're going to come back and we'll deliver part two, which is about healthy brain strategies. Okay, so diving right into our content, we have to start with the most fundamental principle of neuroscience. And in order to just introduce that basic piece, we start with our trusty brain. Here it is, of course, in an animated version, but it's just to show that it looks relatively homogeneous, like it's all one blob. But of course, it's much more complicated, and it's got subregions, and they have discrete roles. And if you zoom way in, you zoom into the primary cell type in the brain, which is called the neuron. And it's just important to take a moment to sit and reflect on the shape of the neuron, because it's very, very strange. Right? And so sometimes I'll pop a question into Hayden so that he can help me in these virtual settings where we're not in a room with each other. Hayden, when I ask you what a cell type in the body looks like, a typical cell, what shape do you think of naturally? What first comes to mind?
I think of a round shape, right?
Yeah, exactly. So most of us, when we think of a cell in the human body, we think of a circle or an oval. Sometimes it's, a flat type squarish thing, if you remember your bio classes. But this is the primary cell type in the brain, and it looks like somebody drew it just to be strange, right? And this is, of course, an animation because they're microscopic. You can't see them with the naked eye, but this is an accurate depiction. So it has all of these branches. It has this very strange snowflake look, roots, trees. It's got this long, 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 long projection that if I ask kids, they tell me it looks like sausage, and so on and so forth. And it's just very strange looking, but it's critical to think about that and absorb it and appreciate it, because that strange shape is what confers the incredible ability that it has, its primary role, which is to make connections. So this neuron has these dendrites that are shown in purple, and their entire purpose is to make new connections to other neurons. And that's where the magic lies, is that there is a relationship between these two neurons that are talking to each other via a synapse. And a synapse is actually an absence of space. It's an absence, it's a gap. It's not a thing. So when we look at synapses, it's a space between two neurons across which neurotransmitters travel, right? So when we think of things in the brain like serotonin and dopamine and other things like that we're commonly familiar with, like oxytocin and things like that, those are neurotransmitters that travel across the space in between those two neurons. because a neuron itself sends an electrical signal, and then it sends a chemical signal in between the two at the synapse. That's where we get electrochemical signaling in the brain. And I actually, in your free time, I recommend looking up some YouTube videos on how the brain turns an electrical signal into a chemical one. It's really fascinating. But that synapse, that space where they talk, that is where the magic lives. And I'll show you what the magic looks like. Because I'm going to go ahead and pop a question out to you again, Hayden. What is the difference between the two neurons that are talking to each other via these really wild looking connections on the left, and the two neurons that are talking to each other via these really wild connections on the right of this slide?
Well, the neurons on the right, there's more dendrites and axons. There's more connections going on.
I like you using your neuroscience terms.
Yes, I'm learning.
I know. All right, so yes, absolutely. So there are many more on the right than there are on the left. And this is the most foundational principle that when you hear Hayden and I talk about neuroscience as applied to coaching, we're going to come back to again and again and again. And it is that our default nature as human beings with neurons, by the way, 100 billion neurons in every human brain, each one of which can make up to 10,000 connections. Okay, 100 billion, it's impossible for us to imagine numbers like that, but each one of those neurons is defined by, this is its definition. A neuron is not a neuron unless it can make new connections, okay? And so I know that every single one of us in this Zoom room and every single one of our friends and family is able to have neurons on the left that go from those sparse connected to the very dense connections on the right, and that the way we get there is not passive, but rather active, deliberate, effortful, passionate, motivated, also with many mistakes along the way, learning. And the example that I use most frequently is when we imagine a baby learning to walk, right? That baby's journey to learning to walk is not simple. It's not even pain-free, right? So they're very motivated, but they spend a ton of time falling. There are sometimes tears. There might be a bump on the head. There might be a tumble, but they get up again and again and again. And that metaphor is perfect for what we know about the learning process that continues throughout adulthood, that continues all the way until we are no longer on the planet. We do not know of any ceiling. There is no maximum in terms of our learning as stored in new connections in our dendrites and neurons. We can continue to make new connections all the way throughout life. Mastery is possible for all of us all the way through adulthood. And if I may just tell one quick story about that to convince you that it's true for all of us all the way into our late life, is there are these, there's a demographic of people that are called super agers. And I think you can just Google like a New York Times piece on super agers. And they look at what's the difference between the folks in our lives, who we all have them, they're 70 and they're 80 and they're very cognitively sharp, versus the folks in our lives who are 70 and 80 and who don't have a pathology necessarily. So they're not Alzheimer's or Parkinson's, but they have, you know, what we would consider normal cognitive decline and maybe some signs of dementia, right? What's the difference between those two groups? And when they study that and they control for all other factors, there's one predictable way to know the difference between super agers and non-super agers, and it's deliberate, effortful practice, to the point that when they learn something new, they are going outside of a comfort zone and they are sticking with it when they want to stop. That's actually the critical piece, especially in adulthood. When you want to stop, when you're ready to get off the treadmill or get out of the pool or quit your Rosetta Stone language learning or etc., that's when you know you are doing that hard work. You have to stick with it for another few minutes or so. Okay, so it's that piece of getting uncomfortable, right? So always imagine that baby learning how to walk. And this is really empowering because it applies to everything, okay? It applies to something as random as a circus performer. That study has been done in neuroscience. This young girl shows changes in her brain as a result of practicing learning how to juggle. It applies to music. That's gotten a lot of popular neuroscience coverage. Perhaps you've come across some of the articles. Musicians show profound changes in their brain as a result of practice and effort over their lifetimes. And then it applies to what we're talking about today. Every single time neuroscientists try to look to prove themselves wrong in the brain, oh, there's got to be some region that's not plastic, right? We're talking about neuroplasticity, the potential for neurons to grow and make new connections. Every time neuroscientists try to look for a place that is not plastic, they prove themselves wrong, and they find that so far we have yet to find an exception to the rules. So that's two wonderful things. There's no maximum, there's no ceiling on neuroplasticity, and there's no part of our behavior that is an exception. Okay, and that includes what we're talking about today, which is we're going to get into our emotional systems, okay? So
let me chime in here really fast, Kelly, is that already what a great reminder to our clients that no matter what they're trying to tackle, to remind them our brains are endlessly plastic. And the reason why, whether it's, you know, talking efficiently with your boss or working on your health or working on your career, whatever, the brain can change. So whatever challenge they're having, this is a great reminder to our client. That's just how you can work in some neuroscience, is that the brain is built to be endlessly plastic, and whatever challenge they're having, the reason why it's hard is because they haven't yet built enough of those, you know, neural connections that Kelly was talking about. So remind your clients they can literally change their brain with continued effort. And when things get hard, it's because they haven't made enough connections in their brain. So it's very exciting for us to be able to let our clients know that you can change your brain, and the brain is built to be moldable and plastic.
Wonderful. Thank you for sending home the take-home messages. And I also appreciate that Susanna is doing that in the chat box as well. So in order for us to get into some of the neuroscience of our emotional system, I'd like to introduce it by showing this concept of how we are all in the same home as these other species, right? So the girl is the human, of course, and then we've got these other species, and we're all in the same house because we actually do share that we have this brain region in common. We have the brain region in common that is responsible for our emotional system, right? And so there is some popular neuroscience that is accurate, and in this case, that's the idea of us having a lizard or reptilian brain. Okay, so I think everyone in this room is familiar with this idea that we have a reptilian or lizard brain. And that's one of the neuroscience concepts that's out there that is relatively accurate. And let me ask you a question, Hayden. If I were to ask you, what is it that lizards think about? What would you say?
Okay, if I was a lizard, what would I be thinking about? Well, eating, sleeping, like fighting off enemies, procreating, probably that's it, right?
So when we talk about what lizards think about in neuroscience and psychology, we talk about 4 F's. We talk about fighting, fleeing, feeding, and mating. All right, there's more of that to come, by the way. That's one of my favorites. So anyway, we share this region in common with lizards and all these other species, right? And it is our fight or flight area. It is our arousal system. It is our emotional system, right? And so it's important to understand that emotions biologically are interchangeable with this idea of arousal, of fight or flight, okay, and our fear response system, all right? And it lives in a region that you may be familiar with called the amygdala. And so here's a picture of a human brain, and we're highlighting that tiny little nugget called the amygdala, and it is basically the shape of an almond, which is where the word amygdala comes from. And it's really small. It's evolutionarily ancient, right? And so again, I'm just going to remind you that we have inherited this region, right? Every new species on the planet does not reinvent the wheel to get a whole new kind of brain. We build onto existing structures. So that amygdala is very much the same as it is in lizards and other species currently living or living in previous millennia, right? And so we have built onto that amygdala, and you can see all that complicated cortex and additional brain mass in this human, but we still have the amygdala whose role is to help us survive, right? And so what does that look like? Well, if we come upon a lion at a watering hole, if we are to survive, we need to hightail it out of there, right? And it's important that we are really motivated and passionate in that moment and care a lot, right? So if I'm thinking, whatever about the lion, I might not hightail it out of there, be eaten by the lion, become prey, and then I necessarily do not pass on my genetic material, right? So it's important to remember that we are descended from the versions of our ancestors that were super aroused, very emotionally heightened. Holy crap, there's a lion, I gotta get out of here. Not only that, but I have to notice where the sun is in the sky. I have to pay attention, very acute, clear attention to my surroundings in that moment so that I don't come back and make the same mistake at the same time tomorrow. Okay, and the reason I want to describe this story and really flesh it out like this is to understand that the emotions are critical for survival, so that's important. We love our fight or flight system. It saves us from death. And it's tied to learning. So we were very passionate about remembering where the sun was in the sky, where the lion came from, where the watering hole was. Emotions and learning have always been tied. We have a bit of a misunderstanding in our popular culture now that we have two minds. One is emotional and one is intellectual. Absolutely not. We cannot check our emotions at the door. That's not a thing. They've always been one brain, and they've always been critical and served a really important role in survival, okay? And so there's a lot of love to be had for our fight or flight system, for our amygdala, and to appreciate that emotions and learning are necessarily critically tied. And here's another image to kind of send that message home, because what I want it to inspire in you is like a feeling of, ew, like just discontent, like you want to change it, you want to fix it, you want to clear, it's wrong, right? And but why would math feel icky? Why would math make you itchy and want to get you out of your seat to change that, right? And it's, you know, we've understood the correct answer to this equation since we were itty bitty. It's been around for a long time, and so now it's very deep rooted in us, and it of course feels uncomfortable. That's the idea that I want us to sort of start to think about, is that intellectually, things take on emotions of their own. And it's important to use an example to really see how there is no separating intellectual from emotional. And it's important that we think this looks uncomfortable. That's a good thing, so that we are compelled to change it and make it right, okay? And that's not a different system than the system that helped us escape predation, to not be prey, right? So that's one really important piece. Our emotions and our intellect are tied, and that our emotional system is really valuable, plays a very important role. There's another important piece, which is that, I'm sorry to have you look at this disturbing picture, but I'll have you look at it for just another moment to say, and now I'll make it go away so that we can feel slightly more comfortable and you can pay attention to me, is that if I were to show you that picture, but flash it, okay? So if I were to show it in less than 250 milliseconds, now I let you see it and be consciously aware that you saw it. But in an experimental setting, if I were to flash that picture, and then I were to ask you if you saw a picture of a man with a gun, you would say no to me, because that is below the threshold at which our conscious brain registers something, okay? You would not have been aware of having seen the picture. But I, as the researcher, would be able to see that you have seen the picture because I'm looking at activity in your brain, and I'll see two things. One, I'm going to see activity in the area of your brain that processes vision, which is at the back. So I'll know that you've seen it. And two, I will see your amygdala start to fire. So your fight or flight response will be elevated, and I will detect sweat on your skin, and I will detect an elevated heart rate. But once again, I will say, did you see a picture of a man with a gun? And you will say no. And I will say, do you feel any elevated stress right now? And you will say no. But I will see that indeed you are experiencing that. This is really important because our brain is very much like an iceberg, where the vast majority of it lives under the waterline and is unconscious. This also applies to our emotional system, okay? Our emotional arousal, much of it is unconscious. We are completely unaware of it, but it is influencing our behavior and our choices and our interpretation of the world around us, okay? And that can feel a little bit intense and scary to understand, because how can you control something you're not aware of? But don't worry, we're here to give you the full picture and all of the good news, okay? So now we've got a couple points. One is that our emotions and our learning are tied, and that our fight or flight response system can be unconscious. And there's another important point, which is that looking at this picture of a beautiful bird in a bush might think it's serene and peaceful. But what I want to help you imagine is that if we are on a savanna in Africa as an evolutionarily ancient version of ourselves, and we hear a rustle in a bush, so we cannot see an image like this, but we hear a rustle in a bush. If we are to survive, we need to interpret that rustle in the bush as a predator. Now, it's not a predator. But if we don't interpret it as a predator all of the time, we risk, again, being very blasé and being eaten by a predator, because some of the time it will be, right? And so what ends up happening is we have to necessarily overly interpret things negatively. So we have a negative bias in our unconscious fight or flight system so that we can better avoid being preyed upon, right? So again, we're descended from the versions of our ancestors that always assumed the rustle in the bush was a predator rather than a bird, because if we thought it was a bird, some of the time we'd be wrong and get eaten. But if we always think that it's a predator, even though we might be wrong most of the time, keep that in mind, we might be wrong most of the time in that case that I'm laying out, but we've still allowed ourselves to escape the chance of becoming prey, okay? So now we have a few points, which is that emotions and learning are tied, fight or flight response can be very unconscious, and that we do have a negative bias. It's important to know these things, and then we will build upon them so that we can actually have an optimistic outlook. And then there is another point, and I will hand it back over to Hayden very shortly. So the other point is that we can learn our fight or flight response, okay? So in this case, we're just showing an animal to demonstrate, but we have a rat in a cage that has an electrified grid, and a sound plays, just a tone that was innocuous. It had no relevance to the rat prior to this learning experience. And then we pair the tone with a shock on the grid, a very minor shock, but it's aversive. They don't like it. They want to escape it. So we've paired a tone with a shock. Then upon future settings on the right side of this figure, the rat goes into the same cage, hears the same tone. There's no shock, but the rat freezes, right? Fight, flight, freeze. And so it freezes because it's experiencing fear, because to it, that sound indicates that a shock is coming, right? However, the shock doesn't come, but the rat still responds with fear, which is that freezing behavior. It actually takes a very long time to extinguish that learned fear. And this will, hearken to phobias and to, learned fears that many of us have that may or may not be rational, right? PTSD, for instance, is one example of where people have these experiences. And so it's just to acknowledge, because this system is evolutionarily ancient and has been so critical for our survival, it's strong. It's a strong association when we associate something with fear, okay? And it can be hard to override. So we have these 4 critical components where we have emotions and learning are tied. Our fight or flight system can be unconscious. We do have a negative bias that is incorrect some of the time. And that when we do have learned fears, they can be hard to overcome, okay? So this is the piece that allows me to introduce the part that is optimistic, because I want you to see the tiny little nut-sized amygdala there on the right relative to that enormous, big, beautiful brain on the left, where I've highlighted a part of our brain that you may have heard of before. That blue highlighted region is our prefrontal cortex, or PFC. And I want you to appreciate its size. And I want you to appreciate that it is evolutionarily very, very young, and that it doesn't fully develop. I have quotations for if you're not looking at me. It isn't fully developed until we are way late in our life, really almost approaching 30 at this point. Now we understand from the science literature, okay? And so we have this hyperplastic, very malleable part of our brain that is our prefrontal cortex that is in charge. It is considered the CEO of the brain. It is the decision maker. It controls our attention. It helps us inhibit our impulses. It helps us manage our emotions. It can regulate this part of the brain that is our fight or flight system. So we first have to know the biology of our fight or flight system and the part of it that really may not apply to our modern world that we have inherited from lizards, but understand that we are humans and we have this incredible prefrontal cortex that confers so much power to us. And that's really where that beauty lives. And so before I get into the roles of the prefrontal cortex, I want to take a moment to turn it over to Hayden, and he can give us some of that coaching magic.
Thank you so much, Kelly. This is so exciting. I know for some of us, the neuroscience at the beginning was a little bit of like remind me of like high school biology, right? A little bit of a review, but it's so important that we underscore that point that Kelly is talking about, because we need to remind our clients of those key points that, you know, especially the one that we have negative bias, and also that our brain is endlessly plastic, but also we have the power with intention and effort to build that prefrontal cortex, which then can really help us manage those emotions. I mean, I would love to hear in the chat box, put a yes if you have ever had a client that's had a limiting belief or a negative assumption. Put a yes in the chat box, right? Aurora's like, yes. Debbie's yes, right? Gail's yes. So we have to understand that now the biology of the brain, it tells us having some of those negative biases are normal, and it's part of our biology. That's the amygdala, right? We have to understand that if we were an animal in the past, and if we didn't, and we heard a rustle in the bush, if we didn't assume I'm going to get killed, I would not survive. So I think that's really important to remind our clients, oh, I can see some negative or I can see some limiting beliefs you're having, which is normal. You know, as human beings, it's normal to have those negative emotions. However, also as humans with intention, we can work on that prefrontal cortex to manage those emotions. So how do we do this, right? Because the whole point of this course is to introduce these neuroscience concepts into our own lives and to help our clients. So first of all, since we're talking about resilience, the definition of resilience is the capacity to recover quickly from difficulties, right? And that also includes emotions, right? To be able to recover quickly from not useful emotions or unproductive emotions, that is also a part of resilience. So we must understand that resilience is a skill set, and that's something to remind our clients. Resilience is a skill set, just like riding a bike, just like learning to speak French, just like learning to cook creme brulee. These are skill sets. And like any skill, it can be improved with applied effort and intention. Remember what we said about neuroplasticity? The brain is endlessly plastic. The brain is endlessly able to make new connections if you put effort and intention into it. So put a yes in the chat box if you think your clients could benefit from regulating emotions better. I know I could, right? And it's a continual skill, right? So really put, yes, right? All of our clients, including ourselves, can work on that skill set to work on our emotional resilience, right? So moving forward, Kelly, the next slide. What are some steps to really help our clients regulate that lizard brain better? Oh, and another point I wanted to make that I forgot to mention about the lizard brain is I think it's really great that Kelly's explaining to us the lizard brain is in all of us. Like our human brains are actually built upon the lizard brain. That's something I didn't know. And I think that's something cool we can share with our clients. I thought the lizard brain was kind of like this metaphor or this kind of concept, which I understood. I've heard fight or flight for years. I've heard the concept of the lizard brain for years, but I actually didn't know that in all of us, our human brains are built upon that lizard brain. I think that's really cool. So we have to accept that lizard brain is in all of us, which is the first. So the straight A's of emotional regulation and personal growth, there's 6 A's that are actually a framework I use for coaching, and it's a framework all of you can use for coaching, right? To develop any skill. So the first A is acceptance. So acceptance that we have a lizard brain, acceptance that we have a negative bias, acceptance that our emotions can be overpowering, acceptance that we can make a difference if we intentionally choose to put effort into our prefrontal cortex. So there's so many things to accept in our brain that you could share with your clients. And in a way, it's like liberating, right? Because some of our clients may be more negative than others. That's true. But accepting that we are negative, we have negative bias. So that gives our client and ourselves a little bit of self-permission, right? A little bit of self-compassion, right? That we don't have to beat ourselves up, that oftentimes we have negative thoughts because it is part of our biology. And remember what Kelly was saying, emotions and learning are tied. I really want to underscore that point. If our ancestors did not have an emotional reaction to a tiger in the bushes, they would die. So our emotions help us learn. And that, we're not going to get too much into motivation today, we'll talk more about that in our extended course. But that's why when we in our coaching with our clients, we always tell our clients, you have to have a strong why in what you're doing. You have to have values tied to your work. You have to have an emotional element tied to things that matter to you in order to stay motivated. Because without that emotion, you're not going to do it, right? So I really want to underscore that point that Kelly was saying. Emotions and learning go hand in hand. You cannot have one without the other. All right, so the first A is acceptance, accepting the part of the biologies of our brain. And the second step is awareness. The awareness piece is becoming aware of, when are my emotions helpful? When are they not? When is my lizard brain acting up? How can I put intention into working on that lizard brain? That is super important, which is probably one of the biggest skills we have as coaches, is to help increase awareness in our clients of if what they're doing is useful and if what they're doing is not useful, right? Obviously, there's very useful parts of our lizard brain. It's helped us survive this long, but there's also unuseful parts of our lizard brain, right? Because I want to use that example again about the negative bias towards the rustle in the bushes. Most of the time, we're wrong, actually. When we assume the worst, most of the time we are wrong. And now we are actually not animals living in, well, we are living in a metaphorical jungle called life, but we are not in a literal jungle. So some examples of negative bias may be like, when your boss calls you in their office, oh my gosh, you have an emotional response. Am I going to get fired? Am I in trouble? Right? That's fight or flight happening right away. When your partner or spouse wants to talk to you in the other room, something comes up in you, right? Or when your friend doesn't text you back. Oh my gosh, have we ever had that happen where you're in the middle of a conversation with your friend, texting back and forth, and you ask them a question, all of a sudden crickets? I have. I'm like, oh my gosh, did I say something wrong? Why aren't they texting me back? Right? So that's that awareness of when is our lizard brain happening and when is it useful, when is it not useful. Yeah, and then I'll go through the rest of the A's. Is then asking ourselves, what can I do differently? And asking ourselves, do I even want to put effort into managing my emotions? That's actually super important, and that's a super important skill and question to ask all of our clients as coaches, is now that we're aware that our lizard brain can get the best of us, now that we have to accept that we have negative bias, we also have to let our clients, we also have to ask our clients, well, is that something you would like to work on? Do you have a desire to regulate your emotions? Because when we do regulate because our thoughts impact our actions, right? Our thoughts and feelings impact our actions. So when you have unproductive thoughts and unproductive emotions, they will lead to unproductive actions. And I would assume all of us as coaches want our clients to be more productive and more effective. And I would assume your client wants to be more effective and more productive. But that is an important question to ask your clients. Well, now that we've learned that your emotions are getting in the way of your productivity and effectiveness, would you like to do something about that? And hopefully they say yes. If they say no, then there's some coaching around there you can do. But we are under the assumption that most people want to have be more successful and lead more productive lives. And as coaches, we want our clients to lead more productive lives. So that's the third A, is asking your clients and having your clients ask themselves, what am I doing that's useful? What am I doing that's not useful? Do I want to do anything about that? And then 4 is taking a different action, right? Which we're going to talk a little bit about today, is different actions you can take to regulate that lizard brain. And then we won't go too much into accountability and acknowledgement, but that's important too, is to realize, how can I hold others accountable? How can I hold myself accountable as I'm working on emotional regulation? And of course, acknowledging yourself and acknowledging other people that help you on that journey. So what's the next slide, Kelly?
All right.
Okay, so I'll introduce this. So let's go into our breakout rooms. I know we are throwing a lot at you, but I think it's important to go to our breakout rooms. And I realize, we're running a little bit short on time, but if we could just do maybe just a 5-minute breakout room, we'll do a quick breakout room. Really, you could introduce yourselves and then really answer these 2 questions in your breakout room. Make sure everyone gets a turn. But how have you helped clients manage their lizard brain lately? Oops, what is the other question? How can you help?
Well, I was going to put them in the chat before people go. I'll put it back up real quick.
Yeah, so how can you help your clients manage their lizard brain more effectively? And also, so far, what you've learned so far, what are some, neuroscience concepts that you can already apply into a coaching session? So let's just spend 5 minutes total in our breakout rooms to discuss those 2 questions. And Kelly, you're going to copy and paste those questions.
I'm putting them in the chat right now. They do go away once you're in your breakout room. They should be straightforward enough, and we can broadcast them to the breakout rooms again. But how have you helped clients manage their lizard brain, and which neuroscience concepts can you apply to your coaching sessions? And go ahead and introduce yourselves first as well.
Okay, so we'll see you in about 5 minutes. So go ahead and join these breakout rooms. You're all going to get an invite. So join the breakout room, and I will bring you back in here. No need to come do anything when the breakout rooms close. You will get sucked back in here when time is up. Okay, so Kelly, you stay in here, and then, oops, Paul. Okay, so let me pause. I'll pause the recording for a sec. Okay, we are back. I realize the breakout rooms, usually we have more time, but we're having so much fun today that we are realizing we're a little bit short on time. We will have, I would love to just hear from one person in 30 seconds or less, so far, what's an insight of something you've had in the breakout room or through your learning so far. 30 seconds or less. Who wants to share something?
Okay, 30 seconds or less. My kids are 18 and 20, and what I was sharing with Leslie is everything that comes out of their mouth, I always challenge it, because they their brains haven't developed.
That's true. They're probably speaking a lot from their lizard brain and not so much their prefrontal cortex. Yeah. And I'm sure we all have clients that could probably benefit from working a little bit on their prefrontal cortex and not just acting and doing from their lizard brain. All right. Okay, let's go back. We have a little bit more content to go over. So Kelly, if we could take back over.
We want to be sure we give you some of our strategies before we send you on your way. So we are going to get into our part 2 right now, where we're going to actually do some of the brain healthy habits, okay? Because it is very empowering to know this about our emotional brains and our whole healthy brains, but we want to actually, again, the main goal is it's great to constantly develop and to gain new understanding, but the question for coaching is, how do we use it in our work with our clients? And so that's where we'd like to be sure that we give you that before we send you on your way today. So as a reminder, I will always make a big fuss about how plastic we are, and I'm going to do that again real quick for you now by just telling one story, which is that you may know that neuroscientists love meditators. They think meditators are awesome to study. And so meditators are practicing the act of controlling their attention. And without going into all of the science about that right now, just suffice it to say that when you are concentrating on your breath or loving kindness meditation, you are controlling your attention. And that is a prefrontal cortex job. That's the primary role of our PFC. And so this is a super cool study, which you don't have to try to make sense of the images per se, but I just want you to notice that we have circles showing where there's been brain activity, change, and growth as a result of meditating in the prefrontal cortex. And some of these people were studied over just meditating for 8 weeks, and some were studied over decades of their life. And so it's just to really send home again, everything in the brain is plastic. All skill sets can be practiced, and mastery is capable in all things that we deliberately put effort into. And meditation is one great example of causing changes and growth and strengthening in our prefrontal cortex, which is, that's really where we want to spend the rest of our time today, thinking about that capacity for growth and strengthening in our prefrontal cortex. And these meditators have all done it with as little as 8 weeks of practice and sometimes as many as decades. All right, so meditators can change their brains. So we want to go back to the straight A's for a moment because we wanted to transition into.
Yeah, so we talked about, now that we have the acceptance of the parts of our brain, where we are asking our clients to be more aware of when their brain is lizard brain is useful, when it's not useful. Now it's got to be asking ourselves if we want to do something about it, and if we do, then taking a different action. So we're focusing on ask and action right now. And the action is some brain strategy, healthy brain strategies that we're going to talk about. And the action is super important because, as you know, as coaches, you know, yes, we help clients with developing self-awareness and we help them learn new things, but we also want them to take different actions that will help them towards their goals. So back to you, Kelly.
And so here's one that we happen to know a lot about in neuroscience. And this is the phenomenon called name it to tame it. And it's actually been uncovered at a lab right here in UCLA, near where both Hayden and I live, and where they bring people into the lab. And I love this picture of this young woman, and she's representing a picture that a subject, someone like you and I might look at when they're in the lab. Okay, so what happens is they go into the lab, they lie down in an fMRI, and everyone's familiar with MRI, which takes a picture, but fMRI is special in neuroscience because the F stands for functional. And in a functional magnetic resonance imaging picture, we can see a cognitive task taking place at the time, in real time. So I can put you into that magnet, lay you down, have you look at this picture, and then I can see activity patterns in your brain, okay? And so in this scenario, I have you lie down, you look at this picture, and what I see in your brain is that you have a corresponding amygdala response, okay? Because she's definitely not at peace, right? And so we, we will in our course go into the lengthier science behind how we mirror each other's emotions. But for now, you may know that we have empathy for others. And so as someone looking at this picture will have a fight or flight response that the researcher will notice in that functional image, their amygdala will fire. And then we will ask the subject, please in your head, not out loud, name the emotion that she's having. Okay, so just pick an emotion that you think this young woman is having, and in your mind, name it. Okay, so say it to yourself. And everyone in that machine who's having a functional picture taken, that they will choose something like sad or angry. And that act of simply saying the emotion to themselves in their mind, again, it's not even out loud, is calming their amygdala. And not only does it calm that fight or flight response, but it turns on their prefrontal cortex. So we see PFC activity go up and amygdala activity go down simply by naming our emotion, not even out loud. Okay, so naming an emotion tames our amygdala response. And this gets stronger and stronger and stronger the more we do it. It's a super simple strategy. And so we like to really recommend that people begin to build this skill set of taking this action of naming their emotions as a way of practicing taming them. And so one way to just get in the general habit over the course of even just regular days is to journal. Okay, and so we might just journal how we're feeling even when we're not emotionally heightened, to get into the habit of practicing thinking about and naming our emotions as a way to strengthen that relationship between the prefrontal cortex and the amygdala, where the PFC is calming the amygdala. And then in those moments of heightened arousal, we are much more able to access that habit that we have built and access those strengthened connections.
Also, before we talk about this terrifying image, I want to make the point, though, it doesn't matter if the person accurately names the emotion or not. That's actually not the point, because that girl, they were sad, angry, but I actually thought irritated. There could be scared. It doesn't really. So that's an important point, which as coaches we know it's more about the process than the outcome. So I want to make that point. It doesn't matter if someone is feeling an emotional response and whether or not they correctly, find that right word for their emotion doesn't matter. It's taking the time to even reflect on, how am I feeling? What would I call this emotion? I think it's sadness or it's anger, like whatever it is, doesn't matter. But the point is taking the time to do it already is strengthening your prefrontal cortex. So that's already a great strategy. To the name it to tame a discrete strategy, but it doesn't matter if you get the name right or not. The act of doing it is what strengthens the prefrontal cortex.
Exactly. And then we're putting up this very jarring photo here because we do want a bit of a, and I know that for some spiders are particularly disturbing, so please forgive me for doing this to you, but it's because I really want to convince you of this idea that we do have a very strong amygdala response that is very normal and evolutionarily important. And in fact, there's probably a very innate response that makes us all afraid of spiders, okay? And if I were to show this image to you again in one of those fMRI machines, even for those of you who are insisting that it doesn't bother you, I will see amygdala response. Okay, so for many of us, we know we don't like it, and you want me to go back to the previous picture, right? But for even those of us who are insisting that we're not bothered, I will see an amygdala response, and I might even see some sweat, and I might even see elevated heart rate because it's very normal. However, you're not getting up and running out of the room. And so I wanted to give you a real life example of, hey, you should be scared of this. That's a super ancient phenomenon that's probably innate. We'd have the same response if it were a snake, okay? But you're not leaving because you have even though you're having this fight or flight response, these are little 2 cartoon amygdalas having fight or flight response, representing that fear response to the spider. But you're not getting up and leaving our webinar because you have your trusty prefrontal cortex that says, that's a picture, it's two-dimensional, it's not going to hurt you. As ugly as that thing is, I happen to know that it's important that I stay in my seat and that I focus on the speaker and that I pay attention to this webinar because it's giving me really important information. So just to, again, really convince you that your amygdala is active all the time, right? Because emotions are always tied to learning, and that your prefrontal cortex, even when you're not super aware of it, is helping you, is serving a very important role at, keeping you attended to the things that you need to attend to. And so the more we can give it the honor of practicing those skill sets, the more we can build that up. Okay, so we have our very wise, very human prefrontal cortex that is saying no need to leave, it's just a two-dimensional picture. But give me some more love and strengthen me some more by taking on some of these strategies like name it to tame it, so that I can do this even easier under circumstances that are even a little bit more scary or more threatening. Okay.
Yes. So, and there is a great question in the chat box, Kelly, if you want to attend to that while I explain.
Sure.
Oh, I don't. Oh, you can't see the chat? Or...
I had to open it up.
Oh, okay. But I just want to. Well, you can type the answer because I know we're short on time while I go through this.
Go for it.
But I just want to make the point, though, as Kelly was saying. Remember, the emotions can be unconscious. And even if it's unconscious, it is still physiologically impacting you. So even though none of us are running out of the room screaming when we saw the tarantula, in the MRI machine is still showing a physiological and emotional response, whether we know it's happening or not. And that is super important that we give that that's part of the awareness piece. And with acceptance and awareness piece is letting our clients know that if they're in a meeting, a board meeting, and there's something bothering, or there's someone doing something, and it might not consciously, they might not be in tune with that there's an emotion happening, but there is. So I think that's really important to recognize. Okay, so and that's where the accountability comes in too, is actually announcing to people that you are working on emotional regulation. How can you hold yourself accountable? How can others hold you accountable? And part of that too, I know it's scary and vulnerable for people that might be emotionally reactive at times, to actually let people know, hey, I'm working on getting better at managing my emotions, and I'm getting better. I want to be able to name it to tame it more. So for example, if we have a client who's always angry in meetings, instead of, blowing up, in a meeting and yelling at someone, for him to be able to be aware of that it's happening, asking himself to take a different action, and the action could be name it to tame it, which may be, you know what, I'm quite angry right now. I need to actually walk out of the room. So the act of announcing that he has an emotional response, naming his anger, actually helps him. And then the accountability piece, though, is then his teammates can be like, wow, I really thought that was cool that Bob actually chose to redirect his anger in a different way. And then acknowledgement, which is Bob giving himself a pat on the back, and then also thanking his team for thank you, team, for letting me work on my emotional resilience and regulation. So, what's the next slide, Kelly?
Okay.
So basically, the process of strengthening the prefrontal cortex, it helps us move from default emotions and actions to productive emotions and actions. So that's another thing we can really tell our clients is, it's normal to have some emotional reactions, but if you want to get better at that, when you work on your PFC, which is intentionally trying to work on emotional regulation, you will, it's not easy though. It's hard. It's hard, like what Kelly was saying earlier, that overcoming a learned fear or overcoming those strong emotional reactions, it can be hard. But remember, the brain is endlessly plastic, so it is possible if the client has the desire to do so. So
I think we should go ahead and wrap up.
Yeah,
and
we will wrap up. Yeah,
continue
go ahead, Kelly.
Populate the chat box. So continue to populate the chat box, and I'll try to answer questions as if it's okay, Hayden, if you want to do the wrap up, and I'll answer.
Yeah, I'll do the wrap up. And then how about this? If people do have lots of insights and questions, Kelly, can you stay on an extra 5 minutes? And is that allowed, Susanna, if we stay on an extra 5 minutes? But if people need to hop off at 30 minutes, half past the hour, that's fine. But if people have questions, Kelly and I can stay on an extra 5 to 10 minutes. Is that okay, Susanna?
Yeah, the answer is absolutely yes. Actually, I've got the webinar running for another 30 minutes after we finish, just in case.
Okay, great. So I want to make sure we finish all the slides in the next 10 minutes, but if people have some questions, please put it in the chat box and we will stay a few minutes after as well. But as you can see, like there's so much to cover, right? There's so much juicy stuff between neuroscience and coaching. All right, but let's wrap this up. So it's really important that we know the brain is incredibly plastic and it can change. So tell your clients that whatever they're working on, if they put effort and practice into it, it will accelerate the change and they can change their brain. Letting your clients know our lizard brain has a negative bias. You know, when the status quo is disrupted, like right now, we are going through a global pandemic. I would say that most of our status quos are disrupted. It's normal that our initial thoughts were negative. But now we get to choose what we want to do with it, right? We just can't live in the negative bias the whole time. Resilience is a skill set. It's just like riding a bike or, you know, making French toast. Like you can learn to get better at being resilient and you can learn to change your brain if you put effort into it. The acceptance piece is really cool to tell your clients. We do have a lizard brain, but if you want to get better at becoming aware, when's it getting in your way? And you know, when you're aware of that, that's the first step to lasting positive change. And then name it to tame it is a brain healthy strategy Kelly was talking about. Taking the time to name your emotions is so important. It really, like Kelly was saying, even naming it will help you reduce the amygdala lizard brain response and strengthen the prefrontal cortex. That's what I just said. And in strategies, yes, there's journaling, there's talking your emotions with a trusted friend or with a professional coach, like we all are. Practice asking yourself how you're feeling, how you want to feel, and what action can I take to feel that way? And that is a super important strategy to ask your clients, which is, well, you know, it seems like you're feeling a lot of anger towards your mother-in-law. Well, how would you like to feel? You know, and what can you do differently to feel the way you want? Right? It's all about empowering our clients that we can control working on our prefrontal cortex. That is one of the few things in our control. A lot of things in life are out of our control, but choosing to work on our emotional regulation and prefrontal cortex is in our control. And then lastly, the strategies we talked about strengthen that PFC, which then helps us move from default emotions and actions to productive emotions and actions. So before we talk about what's next, any other key points or main takeaways, Dr. Kelly Kent, that you want them to know before we talk about our course?
No, I mean, I really have noticed that people are making important connections between other aspects of the real world that relate to the content that we're talking about really basically, I love there's a relatively exaggerated extreme example in the chat box about first responders, that it's really not natural to run into or towards a disaster, except that we are social creatures and we do have a default tendency to want to help each other. But that fight or flight part of our brain wants to tell us to escape for our own survival, right? And so how do we train ourselves to do things that are sort of counter to our survival? And it is about prefrontal cortex work, right? It is about reframing. Some of that is by naming emotions. Some of that is by having conversations with ourselves or with professionals about what the actual threat is. All of that is called cognitive reappraisal. So this very, little bite-sized introduction that we've given, it really leads into a whole world of work that people do all the time in coaching and in other settings, that it's because we are so capable of change and really looking at the world through a different lens is what we're getting at.
And what I just realized too is the acceptance and us all learning about the different parts of our brain and accepting it, it actually helps us be better coaches because it allows us to have more compassion and patience for our clients, right? Put a yes in the chat box if clients, if you've ever got irritated at a client or been impatient with a client. I know I have, because different clients are on a different point of their journey of where their neuro pathways are, right? Some people are better at emotional regulation than others, right? But it helps us actually get more compassion and patience for our clients to understand, okay, so their lizard brain is a little bit more active than mine, but let me help them learn how they can regulate it better. All right, so what's next? You want to keep on hanging out with, me and Kelly. So we are very excited that we created this virtual course called Information for Transformation, the Neuroscience of Coaching. The course is now open. We're so excited. It's been accredited by the ICF for 12 CCEUs, which are continuing coach education units. So you will get 9 units for core competency, 3 for resource development. And this class really dives a lot deeper into what we're talking about today. So the next slide, Kelly, shows us, so what is this course about? So it's 10, we keep on going, so it's 10 pre-recorded sessions. So you do go at your own pace, which is great. And in session 2, you've got to see me do the star exercise. It's really, really funny. If you don't know what that is, I have to outline a star using a mirror. Whew, it is, I mean, that's worth the price of admission, I'm telling you right now. But it underscores the point of neuroplasticity, that when clients put effort into learning something, they can. And then also there's the pre-recorded sessions and the live Q&A. So Dr. Kelly Kent and I will be hosting live Q&As. There's brief assessments after each session. There's downloadable slides and worksheets for you to use with your clients. And for those who really want those CCEUs, there's the final case study. And the final case study, it won't be too difficult, but it is asking you to explain in written format how you will introduce neuroscience concepts to your clients. So the next slide is, yes, I talked about you will earn 12 CCEUs, you'll get a certificate of completion, there's a private Facebook group, and you may be thinking, okay, so how much is this gonna cost? So keep on going. So usually it's $479, but because you attended our webinar, we did do a coupon code for y'all. So ICF-SA TX15. So you'll say 15% through May 24th, which is this Sunday. So your price would be $407. So for $407, it's the 10 sessions, the live Q&As, the 12 ICF CCEUs, certificate of completion, private Facebook group. So I'm really excited because, like Kelly and I were saying, the purpose of our partnership is to help coaches become better coaches by understanding what's happening in the coaching journey. So we hope you join us. It's lots of fun. The Q&As are live and are like this, and we'll have breakout rooms, and you'll actually get to practice how you can introduce these neuroscience coaching principles into your coaching. So if you're more interested in that, you could visit our website, mastermindinstitute.com. And of course, you can email us at hello@mastermindinstitute.com. And then please like us on Facebook. So yeah, I think that's it. So you can stop the screen share, Kelly. I would love to hear from all of you. What are some insights or questions that you got? I would love to hear from everyone. So I know everyone has something to say. So who wants to go first? And if you need to hop off in 2 minutes, please feel free to, but we will stick around. Yes, Chris, did you want to say something? Oh, you're saying bye? Okay, Chris is saying bye. So anyone else? Yes, Maria?
Yeah. Well, first of all, I want to thank Susanna for inviting me to this webinar, and thank you all you guys for giving me the opportunity of learning that much from you guys. It's been really interesting. Although I'm not a professional coach already, I'm studying. That this has been really interesting for me. So I just want to thank you guys for this opportunity.
You're welcome. Well, let me ask you this. Even if you're not an active practicing professional coach right now, how can you use this information to your life or those around you?
Sure. And for sure I want to be a coach like you know, and it's I guess it's gonna make a real interesting part for thanatology as well, you know. So it's really nice for me to learn from you. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Hayden, I have a question for you. So we're talking about resilience, and I'm curious, what are some of the obstacles or challenges that you have seen in your clients when applying neuroscience to resilience? So we know the theory, right? We know the theory and we know some of the activities. And even with those activities, what are some other challenges that you?
That's a great question. The first is helping the client create awareness of how resilient they are, right? Because resilience is a skill set, right? So it's first of all, it's all about being, and being is helping clients understand, like, who do I need to be in order to reach a goal? And resilience is a skill set, you know, so the first is awareness, you know, to help clients see, you know, how resilient they are. And two, if they have the desire to work on that skill set. I think that's one of the first steps, is for clients to gain awareness of, wow, maybe I'm not as resilient as I thought, and maybe I would like to put some time into that resilience. Because you're right, I think the concept of resilience, it's just a concept until people take the time to reflect on how resilient they are. And then to put the effort into wanting to build that skill set. So yeah, so I guess maybe to answer your question, the biggest challenge is lack of self-awareness, that people don't want to admit that they're not as resilient as they are, or as that they want to be. Yeah. Once they have that awareness, it opens their eyes. Yeah, Kelly?
I just wanted to add, and I don't have the coaching experience, so I don't think it's answering from that. It's definitely not answering from that professional perspective, but I do think that people all of us included, still have this idea of we either are or are not a certain type of person. It's our personality is very resilient or it is not, when actually it's a skill like anything else. And so both for people who think of themselves as resilient and for people who don't think of themselves as resilient, understanding that it's a skill set like riding a bike is a big aha, and really like opens up a lot of understanding about how to spend time in order to build the capacity for resilience.
Yeah, and also what's coming up for me is also to be able to share the science and then being able to apply it to them. And in terms of resilience, studies show that really amongst the world's most successful people, well, anyone that's ever had any success, one of the top qualities they needed to get that success was resilience. Like, that's a fact. Like, that's a skill, all right? So then, and like Kelly was saying, it's not that either you're resilient or you're not, it's a skills that you continue to build. So first it's like, hey, so, you know, hey, Susanna, you know, I know you're working on building your business. Well, as you may or may not know, that resilience is a key predictor of success. It's a key skill set that people need to work on in order to be successful. What is your relationship with resilience? How resilient are you? And what is your desire to want to get better at that skill set? Yeah, so that's already some great coaching, is for people. It's one is the facts, which is, you know, like we talked about today, the brain is endlessly plastic. We have lizard brain as negative bias, and resilience is a skill set that you will need no matter if you're opening a restaurant, building a coaching practice, or trying to communicate better with your teenage kids. Resilience is the top skill you would need to have success in any area of your life. So that's the first part, is awareness of the facts. The second part is then asking your clients, how does that apply to you? Like, now that you know that this is what you need, where are you at that? And then and if they realize they're not very resilient, that's okay. You know, it's a skill set that if you put effort into it, you will get better. Because I think what Kelly was saying, some people are like, oh no, I'm just not a resilient person. I guess I'll never be successful at my business. It's like, no, if you want to get successful at your business and you want to get better at resilience, let's put effort into it and design some coaching strategies to help with that. Yeah.
Thank you both.
You're welcome. Yeah.
Do we have other questions?
Yeah, any other questions? Maria?
Maybe I have one. I will try to make myself clear. If I don't, maybe Susana can help me with that. But is depression something? Does depression something to do with how resilient can be a person? You know, what I mean is that maybe some people, like Kelly says, everyone have, we all have the skills of being resilient, right? But sometimes there are people that is in a moment that it's really depressed, and may think that don't have that skill, you know, of being resilient.
Mhm.
So how can you manage that with when a person is really depressed, to make them to help them know that they can be resilient?
So I don't know that I can tell you, Maria, how to do this in an intervention with someone you love, but I can tell you that the most we know, the most well-studied intervention for folks with depression that is the most effective is cognitive behavioral therapy, which I also happen to be talking about with this other attendee who's since left in the chat box. But and that is what we have been talking about today. So cognitive reappraisal is the skill set that is built in cognitive behavioral therapy sessions with folks who are depressed. And it's about reframing their understanding of their own reality and their own capacity for resilience. So it's super well studied. There's many conclusive understandings of it out there. And between CBT and exercise, which by the way raises the brain is better able to birth new neurons and make new connections with exercise. Those two things are the most well understood treatments for depression, because yes, specifically this idea of your self-concept and that you are a changeable person even as an adult is really critical for folks who are experiencing depression to understand.
Yeah. Okay.
And I also do want to make the point too, you know, as an ICF coach, we do make a distinction between coaching and therapy, right? So, so someone with clinical depression would need a professional skill set of services different than a coach. I have worked with many clients that have a therapist and my coaching, you know, but with that said, with someone who is suffering from depression, yes, it may be harder for them to overcome some challenges because they're suffering from depression. There's some, you know, neurochemicals in their brain that it's harder to overcome challenges. However, the definition of resilience is the ability, it's the skill set that you can overcome challenges. So it's to remind people that, you know, no matter if you have a learning difference or depression or even a physical disability, that the brain is endlessly plastic. And if you have this desire to get better, you can. And that's the point. And that's where sometimes with depression, it gets a little, that's why I don't work with people who have severe depression and do not work with a therapist, because there's certain parts that coaches are not trained to do. But what I do remind my clients, you know, if you have the desire to get better, you can. And sometimes with severe depression, people lose the desire and lose the hope to improve their lives. And that if they're at that point, coaches cannot help at that point. In fact, I would have to insist that I end the relationship with them unless they get professional help with the depression. Yeah, because does that make sense? That we as coaches, our best work comes with people who have a desire to improve their life. If there's a loss of hope or loss of desire, that would be not in our area of expertise.
Okay, but right now with the COVID-19 and you know, many people is facing many losses, you know. They are losing, you know, beloved family, and maybe they are losing their jobs and many things that they are very challenging. So I think it's for any coach, could be really, I might say, challenging to encourage that these people to get up from those fears and sadness and everything. I know perfectly that if we find someone that is going through depression, a real bad depression, we should direct them to a professional health, like a psychologist or something. That it's not our job, you know. But how else? My question is, how as a coaches can we, Susanna, help me out with my English. Can we encourage the people and let them believe? I mean, make them believe that they have the strength and the skill in their selves to get out from all the situation. I don't know if you understood me.
Well, go ahead, Suzanne. Yeah.
I'm sorry.
Okay.
People need to leave right now. And so what I would like to say first is thank you so much from the heart, Kelly and Hayden, for your presentation. I love the way you two partnered together, the theory, the application into coaching practice. I love it. The topic is fascinating, and there's so much more that we want to learn about it and dig into it. So we want to thank you also for sharing the information about your course. And then what I would like to thank is our participants for being here. I know many of them already had to go. For the rest of you, I want to let you know that I will follow up with an email, the recording of this session, and also the CCUs related for this session, that as soon as we get the confirmation from ICF Global. For those of you who want to stay and continue the conversation, if Hayden and Kelly can stay another 5 minutes, then we would really thank you for that.
Yeah.
Okay.
Wonderful. Yeah, thank you so much, Susanna. This is great. I just have 2 more minutes and then I gotta hop off.
Yes.
But Maria, you know, feel free to reach out to me, because I'll be honest with you, there's something underneath your question. I think you're trying to ask us a general question based on something in your personal experience. So let's take this offline, and or is my intuition correct? You're asking a general question, but is there someone specifically that you're talking about that you're trying to uplift? Is that, or am I incorrect?
I'm not sure I understood that.
If that is one particular person that you have in mind, or is it in general terms?
In general. I mean, maybe I can think right now in a really dear friend of mine, you know, that she's going through really.
Yeah. So it is a person. But
I also think about general situation, you know.
Well, I mean, you can email me offline, but really the bottom line though is, Maria, like, you cannot make anyone feel anything, because I think you said, how can I make someone believe? It's like, well, you can't, right? Right? It's like they have to be ready to do the work themselves. But I know I can see that you're a very loving person, and that it's challenging for you to see someone suffering through hard times. But all you can do is just, you know, support them and love them and remind them, you know, that they have everything they need already inside of them. And if and when they're ready to tap into that, you know, there are resources. There's coaches, there's psychologists, there are therapists.
Yeah. Okay.
But we are experiencing a challenging time in our life, and I think it's okay to experience sadness right now. But then at some point, we do need to ask ourselves, who do we want to be at the end of this? This is one of the biggest challenges our world has ever faced in, you know, the last 50 years or whatever, 20 years. And we have to, all of us has to do the work and ask ourselves, when this is over, do I want to be a better version of myself or a worse version of myself? And there's nothing any of us can do for someone else if they're not willing to do it for themselves.
Right. Okay. Thank you very much.
Yeah. But like I said, you will have my contact information in the follow-up email that Susanna sends out. If you want to, you know, ask me some certain questions, you're free to. But like I said, I acknowledge you I could tell that your question comes from a place of, like, you love your friends and family and you have some concern for them. So I really appreciate and acknowledge that in you.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much. Yeah.
Well, we got to get going. I got to get going, but thank you.
Yes.
This was so much fun.
And thank you on behalf of ICF San Antonio Board of Directors. Kelly and Hayden are amazing.
Great.
Well, so much fun. Well, thank you so much, and we will follow up over email with our materials and everything. So thank you so much. Have a great day, everyone.